смотришь на меня, как в 17-м, когда я в Петрограде держал речь. Ты нисколько не изменилась. Я очень рад.
Никак не могу забыть Нину. В Москве мне было так одиноко. Я хочу быть рядом с тобой. Не хочу разлучаться.
Zina was one of two daughters Trotsky had from his first marriage with Alexandra Sokolovskaya, a revolutionary comrade from the 1900s. Trotsky had left her when he fled his first Siberian exile for Europe in 1902. When he returned to Russia in 1905, it was with Natalia, whom he had met in Paris. Zina was not well. The death at a young age of tuberculosis of her sister Nina had depressed her, and she suffered from depression in addition to serious respiratory problems. Trotsky wanted her to come to Turkey first and immediately travel on to Germany for treatment. Again, Trotsky faced a visa problem. In a telegram he sent to Tevfik Rushtu Aras, the foreign minister, he indicated that Zina was waiting sick in Odessa, and he asked for an urgent visa to have her brought to Turkey. Trotsky also said he was ready to pay all telegraph and visa fees. The next day, the foreign minister sent him a telegraph. Order given to our Odessa consulate to issue visa for Miss Zina Volkova. Stop. No need for a telegraph fee. Stop. Tevfik Rushtu. But Zina was happy on Buyukada. She didn't want to leave her father's side. The pine-rich air of the island was good for her lungs, and being with Trotsky and Natalia and helping around the house was good for her soul. Trotsky was convinced she needed treatment in Germany.
Хорошо, что Зина привезла с собой Севу. Внук принес в наш дом радость. Только один он и радует нас. Однако, когда случился поджог, мы все решили, что это дело рук ГПУ. Они давно охотились за моими рукописями. Турецкая полиция долго не могла определить причину пожара. И, наконец, установила, что это Сева играл со спичками и сделал поджог. С тех пор мы называем его «маленький ГПУшник». Так хотелось бы, чтобы они остались с нами, но им лучше уехать в Германию.
Zina felt unwanted and went into a severe depression. She wrote to her mother, complaining of her father's aloofness. She felt that he did not want her around.
Извините, она нездорова.
Zina finally accepted her father's wishes and went to Germany in 1932, where the Nazis were growing in strength. Zina had intensive treatment for pneumonia and depression, but her health was not improving, and the situation in Germany with the Nazis frightened her, for she was Jewish. Lvova wrote to his father on January the 5th, 1933, informing him that Zina had killed herself. The final words on her suicide note were thoughts for her little son, who had joined her in Germany from Buyukada just before she took her own life. I feel my end approaching. I don't think I can take care of my child. He doesn't speak a word of German, call my brother. She then locked herself in the kitchen and turned on the gas. Trotsky was shocked and riddled with feelings of guilt. Pierre Franck, his secretary, recounted that Trotsky locked himself up in his room and would not talk to anyone for 5 days. When he emerged, his hair had grown whiter than before. To escape the sorrow and the agony of Zina's death, Trotsky returned to fishing. He could be seen every day with his fisherman friend Haralambos, who only spoke Turkish and Greek. They communicated only with gestures, but Trotsky soon became expert at handling the hooks, the lines, and the nets. News of his prowess as a fisherman was heard even in Russia.
У нас обо мне, Хараламос, ходят анекдоты, за которые можно попасть в тюрьму. Но ты все равно не донесешь. Ты языка не знаешь. Что, брат Троцкий, спрашивает у Троцкого. Вот если бы Ленин был жив, ты бы сейчас был бы в Кремле? А Троцкий отвечает, если бы Ленин был жив, при этом режиме он бы сейчас здесь со мной в Турции рыбу ловил. А ты возьми вот жабру у нее, насади на наживку и бросай. Хорошо клевать будет. У нас в Одессе ловят на жабры. Да. А у вас об Ататюрке ходят анекдоты? Нет? Не понял? Да.
In 1933, Turkey prepared to celebrate its 10th anniversary as a republic. Ataturk wanted to show the world how far Turkey had gone in one short decade. Countrywide gala events, balls, and ceremonies lasted throughout the year. Stalin, aware of Turkey's growing role in the Balkans, began keeping a close watch on Turkey and started to develop relations from 1932 onwards. There was a non-stop exchange of delegations between the two countries, and when the Turkish Prime Minister, İsmet İnönü, returned from a visit to Moscow with a credit line of $8 million, the Istanbul newspapers were full of Stalin's praise. Trotsky was anxious. He was convinced Stalin was putting pressure on Turkey to expel him. Once again, it was time to leave. By early summer 1933, Trotsky knew his days on Buyukada were numbered. He contacted a number of European countries, asking them to urgently reactivate his earlier visa applications. He pressed his friends in France in particular into action, but weeks passed and there was no reply. His hopes were raised when he was allowed to Denmark to deliver a lecture, but the communist parties protested his trip through Europe and he returned to Principe. His finances were dwindling and money started to become a serious problem for the first time since his arrival in Turkey. He wrote to Henri Molinier on June the 7th, "I could even live in Corsica if only France would open its doors." Finally, 4.5 years after his initial request, the French government granted him a visa, but there were strict conditions. Trotsky would not be allowed into Paris and would have to live in a southern suburb under constant police supervision and the threat of immediate expulsion if he failed to obey any of the conditions put forth by the French government. Trotsky accepted and started packing. Isaac Deutscher wrote, "It was not without a tug of emotion that he took leave of the splendor of the Sea of Marmara and the fishing expeditions, and that he thought of his faithful fishermen, some of whom their bones saturated through with the salt of the sea had recently found their rest in the village cemetery, while others had, in these years of depression, to struggle harder and harder to sell their catch." Trotsky and Natalia left Buyukada on June the 25th, 1933, to board the ship Bulgaria, bound for France. He wrote one final letter to the government in Ankara, a letter of thanks for the hospitality and the security they provided during the past 4.5 years. But there was also emotion. In his memoirs, he wrote of his last moments in the villa in Buyukada. "The house is already empty. The wooden cases are already downstairs. Young hands are driving in the nails. The floor of our old and dilapidated villa was painted with such queer paint in the spring that even now, 4 months